afternoon, good night, depending on the time you're watching this. Let me go and refresh YouTube because you always think you're connected and then you look like an idiot. Well, in my case, that's the usual thing. As you know, I always look like an idiot, but let's say more. And I have to refresh to see if it's working. Yes, and it is working. So again, good morning, good afternoon, good night. We are on daylight savings, thing that I didn't know because I am a moron. So if you were expecting this an hour ago in New York, well, everywhere in the United States, I fucked up.
No. Everything is good. Everything is good.
But to all of you, thank you for watching in any part of the world. And as you know, this is not a show about comics. It's about science. Because we are in time traveling right now. You don't know this, but right now it's 5 p.m. in Spain. It's noon in New York. So we are time traveling. We are not talking about comics. We're going to talk about quantum physics here. And it's a Nobel Prize winner, Mr. Tom DeFalco. You know him for quantum physics. He was the guy who helped Christopher Nolan when he did Interstellar. He was a scientist that helped that. If you know, no, I'm not. Everything I just said is bullshit. Just so you know. So let's go back to our subject. Hello, Tom. How are you?
I'm doing great. You know, it's a crazy time in the world, but I'm doing great. I have no real complaints. Being locked up at home is nothing new for us creative types.
Yeah,
we're kind of used to it.
Imagine I'm going to change my name now. My name is from now on is Dr. Victor Frankenstein.
Okay.
And this rotary pen just became, a syringe. So pop. I just gave you the vaccine, and at the same time, I just gave the vaccination to everybody else in the world. So we're free right now.
It would be great if it was that easy.
Imagine that happened, and then I asked you and your wife.
Yes.
Okay, what's the first thing that you've been crazy dying to do for since the first lockdown happened that you could just run to do? The first thing you could do right
now. I think I want to link up with family because I've got some little nieces and nephews that I miss hugging. One of my two of my nephews have 1-year-olds that they can walk now, and I haven't had a chance to pick them up and bounce them around, and I'm just anxious to meet the babies.
Do you miss conventions at all?
To my surprise, I actually miss conventions.
It's happening to all of us, I think.
Well, I've always had a strange relationship with comic book conventions. When I worked at Marvel, I had to go to way too many conventions.
Of course, yeah.
And most of the time, I kind of had a target on my chest. I was the guy that everybody came to complain about whatever they were angry about. I always remember somebody coming and just screaming at me for Steve Ditko leaving Marvel. And I said, Steve's working for us these days. He says, no, when he left Spider-Man. Why did you let that happen? I said, well, I was in high school at the time, so I really didn't have a lot to say about it. So, when I finally got off staff and they allowed me to become a full-time writer again, I stopped going to conventions. Maybe I'd go to one a year or something like that. My joke used to be I went to one this year. I'm trying to cut down. And a couple of years went by and stuff. And Mark DeMattis said to me one time, you owe it to yourself to go to conventions, and you owe it to your fans to go to conventions. And I said, why? And he said to me, you spend so much time working that you can have a tendency to forget why you're working, and forget how the work has affected people. And that's something that I never spent a lot of time thinking about. is I try to do stories that have an emotional kick to them, and I remember how stories affected me when I was growing up, and I wanted to try to do the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm always more frustrated because I can look at what I've achieved, and I know what the great guys have achieved. So I'm always going, and I look at a lot of my work with frustration. And I thought, maybe I should try going to conventions.
Mm-hmm.
And so many people have said such nice things to me. And some people have criticized, and some of those criticisms have been, very valid criticisms. I remember one time somebody was explaining to me something I had done wrong, and I actually told him how I had done it even worse than he thought about. But to my surprise, I do miss conventions.
Mm-hmm.
My wife and I often joke that 2020 was going to be our year to travel. Every month we were set up to either go to one or two conventions or one or two personal trips. So we had that for every month of the year, and that trick didn't work.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe in 2022 we'll get back to traveling.
Yeah, I'm sure. I am not considering the pace. Spain is doing things with the vaccinations, going serious for a second. Not at all. We're like the fourth country in the world. But I was looking at the numbers yesterday from the US, and I was like, seriously, what the hell? This is too fast. I didn't expect it. It's like Biden has everybody on a whip moving, like the federal, because it was 4.6 million yesterday. 4 million people in a day. That's almost all the population in the US being vaccinated by April.
Yeah. I mean, the new administration is taking this virus seriously. I don't want to get too deeply into politics, but the past administration, they politicized a health crisis.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And in this country right now, we have people who still believe that this health crisis is a hoax. Over 500,000 people have died. I had a death in my family.
Yeah.
I don't see how anybody can not take this seriously and to make wearing a mask a political statement.
Yeah.
It's ridiculous to me. I'm very happy for the Biden administration to go out and actually order the vaccines. I mean, the past ones, they developed it, they forgot to order it.
Yes. I remember when I read the news in the New York Times saying that that Pfizer, I think it was Pfizer, offered to double the doses to the administration. Yeah. Trump just said, "No, why?" I was like, "What the fuck?
Yeah,
no, why? What kind of policy is that? Why would we need more?" Like, what?
You make a big deal about it. Hey, you're developing it. Get it into people's arms. It doesn't do you any good. I used to say this about comic books. You can do the greatest comic book in creation, but it doesn't do you any good if it's sitting in a warehouse and people aren't buying it.
Absolutely.
I'm lucky. I've finally gotten my first vaccine. My wife has gotten her first shot. In about 2 weeks, I get my second.
Nice.
I'm very excited about that because I want to go back out.
And as you said, you want to hug your family, right?
Yeah, I want to hug my family. I want to the other things I miss is going out to a restaurant. I enjoyed taking my wife out to a restaurant. I mean, it's a wonderful thing,
Yes, it is.
And because neither one of us has to, wash the dishes later.
Yes, that's also true. That happened. Yesterday with I used to every week. We have a 6-year-old, and every week I used to take her, on Saturday for lunch out, so my wife can rest, be at home, whatever. I always tell her, come with us, and she's like, no, this is my day off. Just go out with the kid. So we went out, and yesterday we tried to go to a restaurant, and they're not open. Here they have delivery, as pick up on delivery. So we tried to, and she was like almost crying because like, Daddy, I miss just going out to a restaurant with you and have even macaroni, whatever, and just enjoy it for like an hour out of home. And I was like, you gotta wait, honey. Maybe 2 months, maybe 3 months, maybe 6 months. But as 6-year-olds and the passing of time, they're still
time has a different effect on them. Listen, I a lot of times on weekends, my once I started taking Saturdays off, I'd gather all the little kids, and we'd go out to some fast food place of their choice, and then we'd go to a movie, and we used to have a grand old time for ourselves.
Absolutely.
But
I was recommending a Spanish restaurant to some friends in New York that I will send you the information later this weekend, and everybody was telling me the same thing. I won't do it. I was like, it's open. Like, no, I won't do it until I have my second shot. Right. When the second shot is there, and we'll see, how the numbers drop in New York, then I'll risk it. Even I'm talking about people in their 30s. They're like, no, not until I have the second shot, not until we know it's safe for everybody else that I go to a restaurant, because maybe it's safe for me because I'm 30, but not to the person who's sitting next to me who's 70. Yeah,
I don't know when I'll feel confident going, eating indoors again.
Yes.
Or go to a movie.
Yeah.
I miss going to movies, but I don't know when I'm going to make that mental leap that I can go to movies again.
Yeah. I went to a couple movies here when that brief space of time between the first lockdown and the second, because my daughter wanted to watch Scooby-Doo.
Oh, hey, Scooby.
I don't know if you watch it. It's
I haven't seen the current movie. I worked on Scooby a million years ago.
I know. That's why I'm telling you to try to avoid it, because you will get really mad. But anyway, so that, and then I made a deal with my wife. She wanted to watch Tenet, the Christopher Nolan, and I went the week later. And I was surprised at how well they're doing it in cinemas, at least here. The moment you pick a seat, automatically the algorithm creates a shield around you. Like all 4 seats in front of you, by your side, by your other side, and by your back. So automatically it creates a shield. So I felt really safe, and it's probably the place I felt most safer was in a movie theater during this pandemic.
Terrific.
So I hope they keep doing it until we all feel safe, right?
Yeah. Well, we have to feel safe. It's we're living in a bad science fiction novel.
Yes.
A poorly plotted science fiction novel.
Yes.
Because we're not sure where the end is. We're in the middle of the book, and it's meandering. Come on, guys, tighten up this plot. Tighten it up. Where's the structure?
Yeah, this is the typical. It's taking too long. Come on.
A million years ago, I was doing a mystery thing, and I often tell this story. And the editor said to me, "I need a dead body by page 5. If there isn't a dead body by page 5, I'm not going to page 6, and neither are you." And that basically told me that get the heck into your story right away. And this pandemic, they haven't gotten into the story yet. We're meandering. Let's get into the story. Let's get to the meat.
We're still we got past the first arc. We are in the second arc, and we're all saying, can we get to the third act and finish the story? In terms of a TV show, we are all saying, you know what, this show should have ended in the last season. This season, no. This is getting overboard. We know what the ending is going to be. Finish it already.
Yeah, let's get to it. Yes. Well, we've run into that with so many streaming shows where they've got material for 4 episodes and they're stretching it out to 8 or 10.
Yes.
Come on, guys, don't do that to us.
Yeah. Did you watch when they were released the Marvel Netflix shows? Didn't you feel exactly that? Because I felt, except for maybe Jessica Jones season 1, with any other of the Netflix Marvel shows, I felt there was, they should have been like 4 episodes, 5, and they were all so stretched that I got bored by them. I
haven't finished watching all of the Netflix shows just because of that. I like old episodic television where every episode had a beginning, middle, and end.
Yes.
And even if they had subplots that went from episode to episode, that's fine. But let me have a unit of entertainment.
Yes.
I'm watching this 1 hour. I want to see that. I see complaints from people. Their first issue of a comic book has come out and nothing has happened in that first issue, and they say, "But this is a 12-issue thing. You gotta wait for the story to build." No, you gotta hook me right away. If you don't hook me,
you talked about TV shows, and I was going to make exactly that comparison. When I read a comic book that doesn't have, even if it's part of a bigger story,
right?
And I was put the example of Watchmen. It was part of a 12-issue story, but every issue had a beginning, a middle, and end. Every issue.
Yeah.
And same with The Dark Knight. It was a 4th issue. Blah blah blah. Every issue had a beginning. Every miniseries that Marvel did during your era, it was the same thing. Every 4, even if it was 4 issues, 6 issues, whatever, that doesn't matter. You could read a complete story per issue. Don't you think that when we don't see that in a monthly, my question always is, why would I bother to buy a monthly if I don't have a full story in every issue, even if it's part of a bigger story?
And that's what's happening. I think that's one of the reasons why comic book sales are so poor these days. I think people are bored. They, I've said this a number of times where, some big miniseries is coming out, and I know the creative person or the creative people, and I'm saying, well, it's supposed to be a 4, 6, 8 issue miniseries, supposed to be over 8 months. I know it's going to take a year and a half for this thing to come out. I'm going to wait for the trade. And by the time the trade comes out, I've lost interest in the thing. So I didn't buy the individual comic books. I didn't buy the trade. I see this, too much. Now, I know I'm not the audience. I'm not the audience. I'm an old man. I don't have that much time left. So if I'm going to sit down and read something, I want to read it now. But, you got to grab your reader by the throat on the first page. And if don't, it's not his fault that he's not following you. It's your fault. Yeah. A creator, the last limited series I read was a 12-issue limited series, and I read it because I liked the person who wrote it, and I really wanted to like his work, and I couldn't. A friend of mine said to me, how's it going? I said, well, I'm on the 8th issue and I'm still waiting for the story to start. And in fact, I got to the 12th issue and the story never started, never really started.
Yeah.
He dealt with a bunch of fringe things, had a couple of nice moments here, nice moment here, but he didn't have an overarching story. And certainly didn't have stories for 12 issues.
Yeah, that's one of the biggest problems that I find not in everything, but also since we are going to TV shows, I think that's a general problem because many people tells me, well, that's the graphic novel mentality compared to to the monthly mentality, and I compare that to TV shows and movies. When people says, oh, but why do we need stories that has a beginning, middle, and end in every episode when we can have a fuller story in 15 episodes? And I was like, because sometimes I want one thing and sometimes I want the other thing. Why can't I have both? And so that's the same about comicus. If I want to read a full album, like the French or European kind, I can read it in a volume. Yes, that's what I want. But why can't I have the other one when I want to read a comic book in 15 minutes and have a full story and wait for the next story to be complete? That's like let me say this. What did you think about WandaVision if you watch it?
I did watch WandaVision. Well, the first couple of episodes, I'm watching it and thinking, boy, these are actually fun sitcoms. And every episode, was a kind of a complete unit.
Yes,
and yet
that's why I was asking.
And yet enough to say, what's going on? I got to see more.
Yeah.
Back in the day, I used to tell people, everything has to be a complete unit of entertainment. And they, an assistant editor once said to me, "But what about your Fantastic Four? It's one long story." And I said, "Look at it. Every issue." I think we were doing 22 pages there. I said, we have a 20-page story with a beginning, middle, and end. And then we have like a kicker that leads you on to the next one.
Yeah.
But you get your 22, you get your beginning, middle, and end. And you have to have that beginning, middle, and end, because without that, there is no sense of satisfaction. It's like, having a whipped cream cake. Now, we like the whipped cream on the top of the cake, but if it's just whipped cream, we walk away and we're not full.
Yeah.
We look to stories to kind of make sense out of the chaos of existence.
Yes.
Because the nice thing about stories is everything in a story means something. If something happens here, it means something to the story. Where in real life, sometimes things have no meaning. They're not related. Coincidences actually happen in real life.
Yes.
People run into each other that didn't expect to run into each other in real life. In a story, if you run into somebody, it has meaning later on, or has meaning right there. They give you something that you need to go on. Because stories are structured.
Yeah, but that's I was asking in terms of WandaVision, because I noticed that same thing in The Mandalorian. About Disney trying to tell full stories in every episode, but part of a full story. And that's why I'm asking, is because I'm noticing that comics are finally going around again, trying to do the same thing. Like we have an era when everything was not everything. I'm going too far, but let's say a lot of stuff was written for the trade. But I'm seeing that we're trying to go around again, because we are realizing the amazing potential that serialized storytelling has, right? I mean, why can't we tell full stories in one issue? Why can't we? If this is a monthly stuff, we need to do it, right? It's part of the
absolutely we need to do. I even stopped buying some trade paperbacks, because you pick up a trade paperback and you start in the middle of a story and you end in the middle of a story.
And
I thought, wait a minute, if I pick up a book, once you pick up a book, you want a beginning, a middle, and end in a book.
Yeah.
Whether it's a trade paperback or graphic novel or whatever, you pick up you pick up any novel. I don't want to know that I got to read another novel to find out what's going on.
Yeah.
I'm paying my $10, my $5, whatever the heck it is. I want the story.
Yeah.
I I could just imagine, some novelist saying, okay, so, in our first novel, we're going to introduce all these characters and we're going to have a bunch of these things. But it's not till the next novel that we realize who the bad guy is. No, come on.
That's not how it works. Yes.
No, it doesn't work like that. Even when you have novels that are part of a trilogy or big arc, or that's a Game of Thrones.
Yeah.
Each of those books, I don't know, 1,000 pages long, and those are full novels.
Yeah.
Those are actually, there's so much stuff in each of those novels. But
I guess that the most important lesson we can tell people is that even if you're doing a bigger story, you should never forget that people need to buy the freaking comic every month, right?
Absolutely. I've always looked at things, you take Spider-Girl. I'm going to use an example I know. Every issue, I think we did like 130 issues or something like that. Every issue is a self-contained story.
Yeah.
But it's all part of a larger soap opera. And the soap opera is what hooks people in.
Yeah.
You become interested in the different characters. You want to know what's happening in their lives, what's going on with the, Spider-Girl's life, her boyfriend's life, her friend's life, all the characters, moving in and out. That soap opera is a grand scheme, but every issue is a complete story. Now, the great thing about that soap opera is, if we construct a great enough soap opera, then okay, this issue, we had a lousy villain. The story didn't quite come together the way we wanted it to. But people are forgiving because they want to know what happens to Mayday's life. Is she going to go out on a date? Is she not going to go out on a date? Is her father going to catch her doing something she shouldn't be doing? And I often laugh when people talk about Stan Lee's biggest, contribution, because they always say, characters with feet of clay. And that helped out a lot. But I think what Stan really did for comics that so many people have lost sight of is he created soap opera. He brought soap opera to comic books.
Yes.
Every issue of the Fantastic Four, all we cared about is what's going to happen with the individual characters. Spider-Man, what's happening in his life? There were issues where, 70% of the issue was Peter Parker. And we cared about Peter Parker. It was the soap opera there. It was all the other characters. I've been somewhat discombobulated where I look at a 6-issue limited, 6-issue arc. And okay, maybe across the 6 issues, there's one story, but there are no subplots. There's no supporting cast. I don't know how to do a comic book without subplots and supporting cast. People talk about world building. To me, the world building is building a world around your characters, all the individual, supporting cast and their life stories and what's going on with them. And, that's how you build walls. And again, hey, listen, I know I'm an old fart. It's, ancient history. I'm not the market anymore. I just know that this stuff works, and it works outside of comics.
Yes. That's why I was making the comparisons to TV shows, because I think that TV shows and comics made the same mistake, like forgetting about the audience you want to keep every week or every month, depending on what you're talking about. And they're finally realizing you need to keep them. You can't just hope that they stay. No. It's part of our job to keep them, right? We cannot tell the reader, no, you're not staying. That's your problem. No. It's I need to make you stay.
It is definitely our job, because, we are asking for two important things from our readers. we're asking for their money,
Mm-hmm.
and we're also asking for their time.
Yeah.
Now, money they can always get back. That time they cannot get back.
Yeah.
And we have to make sure that, every issue we put in front of them is worth their time.
Mm-hmm.
That every issue has to tell them something about the human condition. Every issue has to, hit them on some emotional level or show them something they've never seen before.
Mm-hmm.
And if we fail to do that, we have failed in our great task. And our task is to entertain people.
Yeah, absolutely.
I've heard some of my peers talk about how they want to educate people and that sort of stuff. And I'm thinking, hey, you're no big brain. Who the heck are you to educate people?
Mm-hmm.
All right?
Yeah.
We're to entertain them and entertain them the best way we can.
But you can educate through entertainment, right?
Oh, yes, you can. Yes, you can. I have been known to slip an occasional idea into the story,
Mm-hmm.
and I am no great brain.
Mm-hmm.
I wish I was. But a lot of this all comes down to craft.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
People, their fire engines going past the a lot of the current crop of creators come from the independent comics, and they haven't been taught the craft.
Mm-hmm.
And there is a real craft to this. We are constructing stories, and you build a story kind of like you build a house. You lay a foundation, and you build your excitement.
Mm-hmm.
And some that people often get wrong is you've got to keep building up the stakes in the course of a story to reach your climax.
Yes.
And that climax is the biggest thing that's happened in this story. And then once the climax has occurred, get the hell out of that story. Just get out.
Yeah. Don't stay around. You already told your story. Get out.
Get out. Get out. I often look at things that were structured terribly. The Ben Affleck Daredevil movie. It builds up to this big fight with Bullseye, and it's a big fight, and it's a terrific fight. And then after that fight with Bullseye, he goes off and has another much smaller fight with the Kingpin.
Mm-hmm.
And then a bunch of other things happen. I'm sorry. Movie should have ended after that big fight with Bullseye. That's when the movie ends.
Mm-hmm.
Once that happened, we're done. Now, there was a director's cut.
Do it the right way, which is do a smaller fight with Bullseye and a bigger one with Kingpin.
Well, there was a director's cut that did that.
Yeah.
It had a smaller fight with Bullseye, built up to a bigger fight with the Kingpin, and the Kingpin fight was then much more satisfying. So many films. Sometimes I'm watching it, I'm thinking, well, this film ended 10 minutes ago. What are you doing? Why am I still sitting here? I don't care about any of this other nonsense.
Yeah, it's like why it's like, okay, this is over. It happens a lot with me with the Spielberg movies. He has to get the happy ending, whatever way. When the story is telling you, no, this story, Minority Report is an example. Like, no, you're telling me the whole plot has been telling me this has to have a really bad ending, a really unhappy ending. Tom Cruise has to die because that's how a story is gonna. And then he always finds the way to make it a happy ending. Or like in Saving Private Ryan or in Schindler's List, those epilogues. And I'm like, I don't need the epilogue. You already told me the story.
Yeah, they're just and you have to construct the story so that all of your loose ends are resolved with the climax. And if you have a bunch of loose ends after the climax, then you screwed up. You screwed up. You didn't structure properly. You've got to, I've said this so many times, and I use an archaic expression. should have been run through the typewriter a couple more times.
Yeah.
Now nobody uses a typewriter anymore.
Yeah, but we got the meaning. Get the meaning. By the end of the day, it's like this script did in a third draft.
Yeah, it needs one more shot.
Yeah.
I've often said that when I really have time to work on something, it's much smaller, much more condensed.
Mm-hmm.
If I'm really pushed for time, then it's much more bloated. Because each time you go through it, you're cutting things. You're cutting, because you want it mean and lean.
Yeah, but by the end of the day, are you a writer that? Let me say it this way: when an idea comes to you, you're more thinking about the structure of the story you want to tell, or is the emotion that drives you to tell a certain story?
The purpose of the story is that emotion.
Mm-hmm.
I want that, emotional kick. I want to achieve that emotional kick, and I achieve it through the structure.
Mm-hmm.
To me, the structures are the tools that we're using to build the house.
Mm-hmm.
So everything is structure.
Mm-hmm.
But the goal is you use the structure to give that emotional kick, that point.
Mm-hmm.
If the theme of your story,
yeah.
everything hits home because of the structure.
Mm-hmm.
The structure is how we as human beings understand that we've heard a story.
Mm-hmm.
Those of us in America, that sort of stuff, we follow the basic 3-act play.
Mm-hmm.
in everything we do. It all goes back to Shakespeare.
Yep.
And structure is best when it's invisible. When it's happening,
of course.
It's happening and you don't see any of it, and it's all invisible. I used to tell Ron Frenz, the artist I've probably worked with the most, and because I love writing on his coattails, because he's a great artist and I don't have to do anything. He does it all. But I used to tell Ron that we are at our best when we are totally invisible.
Mm-hmm. That
people are unaware of the fact that they're looking at artwork or they're reading a writer or that sort of thing. I used to get a big kick out of the fact that back in the day when we had letter columns and people used to send in letters and that sort of stuff, for the comic books that Ron and I were working on, or all the comic books I was working on, people only talked about the characters.
Mm-hmm.
They never once discussed my writing. They never once discussed the artwork. All they talked about were the characters. I'm really angry about what you did, what's happening to Ben here. I'm really angry about this. I'm really angry about that. The only people who ever discussed, my writing or the artwork were the fan press and the critics and that sort of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And, they were not happy with us.
Wow. As they are.
Yeah, but hey, listen, the comic books were selling, so I didn't care.
Exactly. So, and also we're talking about that, the emotion and the structure. So, if I ask you to compare, we're going to talk about music now. Comics storytelling for you, is it a symphony, but opera? Is it jazz, or is it rock and roll?
In terms of storytelling, we are closest to opera.
Mm-hmm. Yes, absolutely.
We are big gestures, big things happening. We're playing to the back of the theater.
Mm-hmm.
And we have to play big and strong and powerful. Movies are much more subtle. There, I think you have a little bit more jazz going on. You know, there's some rock and roll in comic books, but you know, some rock and roll, some jazz, a little bit of everything, to be honest. But we're closest to opera.
Yeah, I always get, from creators, it depends on the story you're telling, and I always say, for me, that's fine and dandy. But when we apply it to superheroes, I think we have to go to symphonies and we have to go to opera, because superheroes is like we go to the big fight, then we go to a dune, we have a moment of quietness, boom, and we go again, and we go again, and we go again. So it's that we are always going for that moment, when the big baritone voice, or the singer is going really loud and then quiet and loud and quiet and loud again. That's what I think is the essence of superhero comics, right?
Superhero comics, yes. In humor comics also.
That's true.
A lot of humor comics. I'm trying to think, mystery comics, we're building suspense. We're constantly building suspense, and you've got to be on a slow and steady rise of building suspense.
See, but the mystery comics, that's when I apply the exception. And again, if you don't agree with me, just tell me, shut up, you have no clue. And you'll probably be right. I always think with mystery comics, that's progressive rock.
That what?
I always think about mystery comics, they are like progressive rock, like prog rock. Because they keep building, they keep building, they keep building.
Yeah, they have to keep building. They do have to keep building. You can never let up on the suspense, and in any sort of mystery thing, short story, a novel. Novels are always a real pain in the neck with mysteries, but even if there is no mystery in it, the thriller aspect of it. Most mysteries don't. Most mysteries today don't even have a mystery in it.
Or as a writer told me, and I won't name names, but it's a novelist. He told me, in many cases, we can pull something off that we couldn't 10 years ago. Like, why? Like, we don't even need to solve the mystery. Like, what? You're telling me that? No, I'm sorry. I'm a mystery novelist, and right now, people is satisfied even if we don't solve the mystery. And I'm like, I could kill you as a reader if you don't solve the mystery.
Sorry about that.
That's fine. And as a reader, I if you don't solve the mystery, I could just kill it. Like, well, that's the audience today. We sometimes we don't even need to solve the mystery, and they're satisfied just because of what we told through the structure, as you said before.
Yeah, I don't believe that. I think you gotta, you gotta solve the mystery.
I think so. I agree with you.
That's why I bought the book, to find out who killed so and so.
But what is for you what makes comics so unique? What makes comics different to everything else in terms of the storytelling, in terms of the story you want to tell, or anything in anything actually?
I think it's the team sport aspect of comics. I love working closely with an artist. Working on a regular comic book, I should say I used to love, working on a regular monthly comic book with a regular artist, and building a world and building a life for our characters, and falling in love with our characters as we're doing it, and doing some horrible things to our characters. But just building that whole universe around our characters, and Ron Frenz, Paul Ryan, Ron Lim, Herb Trippy. When we were working on things together, I throw out ideas, they throw out ideas. I always say with Ron, all the good ideas that you liked, he came up with, and I came up with all the bad ideas. But we throw and jam and work together.
Yeah.
And I love that about comics. Writing prose and novels or short stories and that sort of stuff. That's very solitary. You're, well, all writing, you're locked up in a room by yourself, but there you're not really hearing anything until all the work is done, and then people come in and after you've worked 6-8 months on a novel. That's when the other people come in and saying, yeah, you know what, this scene could have been more powerful. This, could have been that could have been that, and then you futz with it. But by then you're already thinking about your next projects. How film is a wonderful nightmare. Because you're constantly rewriting against crazy deadlines, and it doesn't matter how many times you're rewriting. You're on the set and an actor says a line and it just doesn't sound right coming out of their mouths. So you have to constantly ad lib, and like I say, it's a wonderful nightmare because when you're ad libbing and it works and it comes together, terrific.
Yeah. And
if you're just like stunned by something that has happened, you go,
Yeah, absolutely. That reminds me of when Kevin Feige told the story about how Robert Downey Jr. ad-libbing, defined what Marvel Studios could be. When he said, the story that when he said, "I am Iron Man," that wasn't in the script.
Yeah.
That was because they couldn't make it work. With him saying, "I am not Iron Man," blah, blah, blah. It didn't work. As you said, something wrong coming out of his mouth. Until he said, "I'm Iron Man," and suddenly they look at each other like, this works.
That works. And, I have such utter respect for actors because they have this ability to delve so deeply into characters and really become such other people. I look at that and I think, wow, even if I type the words, it's their words now.
Yeah,
I don't have the, to film. I don't have the same emotional connection to film that I do for, comics. Comics, I have the greatest emotional connection to. I don't know why. Maybe it's because I grew up reading comic books.
They've been a part of your life so many years that I guess that they're ingrained in your blood, right? So the reaction is gonna be not even thought out. You don't even think about it. You just react, right?
Yeah. I still look at my old comics. These days I look at the Masterworks because I don't own a lot of those old comics, and I still love so many things. Every once in a while I'm talking to Tom Brevoort and I'm always busting his chops about, hey, I want to do Sergeant Fury and his Howling Commandos. Not true. I love the Stan Lee and Jack Kirby Sergeant Fury and his Howling Commandos, but I know I couldn't do that kind of book today. But I do it just to bust Brevoort's chops, because this way he thinks I'm still senile and he doesn't bother me to do any work.
Have you ever talked with Tom about bringing back Spider-Girl, or you consider that chapter of your life closed?
I've never really discussed it with Marvel. I don't know if in the modern world if I'd even be allowed to do Spider-Girl anymore. Nowadays, if it's a woman character, it has to be written by a woman, or drawn by a woman, or that sort of thing. Today, if I had proposed Spider-Girl for the first time, they dump me and bring in other people. a bunch of women to do it. And I think that, hey, if I'm a writer, I should be able to get into other characters' heads. And if I can't get into other characters' heads, I'm not a writer. I often laugh when I see, women writing The Punisher. Especially if it's somebody who complains when a male is writing a female book. I think, hey, writers write, and we can write, any sort of thing.
Yeah.
The kind of comics I want to do, which are complete units of entertainment that are part of a bigger fabric, a never-ending soap opera. I don't know if the audience, will support that.
I think they will. Honestly, I think, as I said, the turn of the wheel. We are past that era where everything was written for the trade, and people is asking, as in TV shows. There's a reason, Disney, HBO, and Apple are doing serialized storytelling, as we said, not binge watch, and everything is week by week with a full story per episode. I think that we're at the end of that cycle, and back in the cycle where people are saying, no, I want to be satisfied by the weekly episode, or by the monthly.
Well, I know there's going to be a new Star Trek Star Trek TV series. I got to keep my star things separated, featuring Pike.
The Strange Worlds. Yeah,
and those are all going to be complete self-contained episodes. I think the pandemic, was a slap in the face for a number of reasons, but one of them is we have to tell our stories in smaller units.
Yes,
because we don't know, if anybody will ever be able to get the next issue or film the next episode. Suppose we're in the middle of a 6-episode arc.
Yeah.
And then we get shut down, which we've been getting shut down.
Yeah, absolutely, and you're absolutely, and it makes absolute sense, because the Star Trek shows in whatever it's called now, Paramount Plus or CBS All Access, we watch it here in Amazon. It depends. Yes, Discovery we watch it on Netflix, and Picard we watch it on Amazon Prime, believe it or not, in Europe. Right. But I always thought exactly what you said. This is not binge watch. This is one episode per week, as in all TV. But they're telling us a full story when it's weekly TV. It makes no sense. Because they're shot as if it was prepared to be binge watch, and it's not.
Yeah.
So when they announced what you said, no, Strange Worlds, the Pike one, and number 1 and Spock is going to be episode, like the old Star Trek. I was like, but that's how all these shows should be, because they're weekly. They are not to be binge watched, so they have to tell separate stories. So, as I said, I think this is changing again to go. That's why I was asking about Spider-Girl. If you were asked, and again, this is not like a new character for a new writer. That's your baby. So it would be natural for them to call you and say, hey, would you like to, as they did with Peter David with Maestro. Like, hey, we're going to tell a new story with Maestro. Do you want to do it? That's why I was asking, if they asked you to do new stories with Mayday, would you be interested, or that's a chapter that you consider closed?
We were on that book for 13 years and probably could have done another 13 years. Because the longer you're on a book, the deeper your understanding of the characters go, and the more you can, the more you can do. If I guess if Marvel wanted me to, come back and do Spider-Girl, and and I can bring back Ron and the team, yeah. I don't know if I'd want, if they said to me, we have got this other artist, I don't know if the chemistry would be right to do that.
Yeah, because he was your partner for most of it. So by the end of the day, it's part of what you said, right? With you and Ron, or with Paul, did you believe that it was such a meld of ideas and thoughts that by the end of the day, it wasn't Tom or it wasn't Ron. It was like a third entity you guys created.
Oh yeah, yeah. I so many times, with with Ron, especially with Ron, is that I'd call him up and I'd say, hey, I got this idea, or he'd call me up and said, I have this idea, and then we'd start talking about the idea, and the original idea got thrown out,
Mm-hmm.
and we ended up with some new idea, and we wouldn't be able to figure out no, what was his contribution, what was my and and we made it. I made a deal with Ron and with Paul and Ron Lim. Right up front, I said, here's the deal. Every character we do, we're going to just split 50-50. Because some characters you're going to contribute more, some characters I'm going to contribute more. We're just going to do 50-50. And we're just going to do 50-50 throughout the whole thing, so that we don't have to worry about, who contributed what.
Mm-hmm.
And and this way I get to hang on their coattails because I get them to do most of the work and I get to sit back and write the credits.
Have you have to go through? Sometimes I talked about it with writers, and they tell me stories about you are in the first arc, everything is fine. Second arc, everything is fine. You get to the third arc, and then suddenly your characters start telling you, "No, this is wrong. This is not me. You're going in the right direction, in the wrong direction. You should correct." Have any not literally, of course. I'm not telling you're not, but have any?
Oh yeah, no.
Fought back at you saying you are not. I know more about myself than you do. Correct things. I'm gonna go back to one of our a story Ron and I did for Amazing Spider-Man. Mm-hmm.
All right, we're working on Amazing Spider-Man during our first run, and we had worked out the plot. I got the plot approved by the editor. We knew what the next 3 issues were going to be. We were on our path, and it was a story with the Puma had shown up, and had shown up at Peter Parker's apartment because he could smell. He's following on scent, and he gets to the apartment and he knows that Spider-Man is in that apartment because it's just on scent for him. And Mary Jane is there, and Peter has to throw Mary Jane out of the apartment and this and that, and then later on has to explain to her, why the Puma had burst into his apartment. And we had an explanation, which I forget what the explanation was. And I'm typing up the scene where Peter basically gives Mary Jane the bullshit story.
Mm-hmm.
And as I, type up the scene, suddenly I type, and Mary Jane turns to Peter and says, enough of the bullshit. I know you're Spider-Man. I've always known. And I thought, wait a minute, what? And I'm not quite sure where that came from, but that seemed to be the most natural thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I looked at that thing and I said, yeah, this is going to change everything. Mm-hmm. So the first thing I did is I called Ron and I said to him, Ron, I'm typing the end of the story. He says, yeah, I know how the story ends. You don't even have to type it. I can, I know from our notes how to finish it. But I used to type the plots anyway, I said, yeah, well, it took a weird turn. I said, and then Mary Jane turns to Peter and says, I know you're Spider-Man. I've always known. And Ron's first reaction is, no, come on, that. And then he stops. And then he's thinking, he's on the phone. I can hear him thinking.
See the pause, like.
Yeah, and he's going, you know what? That makes sense. And he says, and that explains, and he starts telling me scenes from comic books from years gone by, and this explained.
Not even your own comics, right? He was remembering comics from somebody else and added to the pieces, which makes it amazing.
And I said to him, and he goes, "Oh man, but this is going to change everything." I said, "Yeah, listen, don't worry about it. I'm going to talk to our editor was Danny Fingroth. I'm going to talk to Danny tomorrow, and he'll shoot this down." And then we went to Danny.
It takes that away from this crazy idea.
Yeah. So we talked to Danny the next day, and he had the same reaction as Ron. No, wait a minute. Wait a minute. Yes. He says, but this changes everything. We got to talk to Shooter. We walk into Jim Shooter's office, and Jim Shooter looks at us. He goes, wait a minute. You can't. And he goes, wait a minute. You know, that actually makes sense. And he goes, so what happens after this? And I go, I don't know. All I know is that the next 3 plots I have to throw out now.
Did you guys even ask Stan about it, or just?
No. We didn't have to ask Stan about things like that in those days. And but when the comic book came out, Stan called me and he goes, you know, I never realized that Mary Jane knew, but it does make sense. And you know, and like I said, we knew where we were going for the next 3 months. Well, that went into the garbage. We had to, you know, kind of start from scratch and work things out, and you know, the characters took over.
Yeah.
In Spider-Girl, a lot of those characters, they would take over, you know, in the course of stories.
So it's not even them arguing back at you, figuratively. So, but they just take over, you know. Even when the idea just comes and tells you to go in a separate direction. Right?
Go this way and that way. I mean, there was a character, Moose, who was bullying this other character, Jimmy Yama. He was always bullying Jimmy.
Yeah.
And then something happened in the school, and somebody was running, you know, some monster was running in the school or something. I don't remember the details. And then I got to this scene where Jimmy is threatened, and Moose instinctively grabs him and pulls him out of the way and saves his life. You know, I put that into the plot because it just seemed, you know, yeah, he's bullying this guy, but he doesn't want him to get hurt.
Yeah.
And I, you know, and Al Williamson called me up as he was inking that story, saying, "I love this scene. I love this scene." And then Al says to me, "You know what? We should have these guys get together." And they still don't like each other. Yeah, just because they're going to help each other doesn't mean they have to like each other.
Absolutely.
And you know, and the characters, because we try to imbue them with such, we do our best to imbue them with life, the overarching soap opera, that they do behave. They sometimes surprise us.
Yeah.
And
because they're human in the end, right? As you said,
it's all
for me. Just you mentioned Mary Jane knowing, and for me, it's actually obvious. Like, how could she not know? So of course, it all makes sense. But that makes it more human. If we are like at all times saying no, she couldn't know, and trying to find, as you said, excuses for her not to know, it doesn't feel real. It doesn't feel human. But the moment you say she knew, we all think, as you just said, of course, you know, it takes 5 seconds, but then we say, well, that makes sense.
Everybody had that same reaction when that comic book came out. They were all going, wow, yes, of course. And you know, and so many times with the characters, they've done things that, you know, just threw people. I mean, something that was throwing a lot of people when Spider-Girl started, it was Peter Parker was against daughter being Spider-Girl. Yes, a father was against his teenage daughter risking her life. Really? Oh, I'm shocked to hear that.
Yeah,
Um,
it's like when people say, when people hear actors saying, "No, I don't want my daughter or my son to be an actor," and they're like, "Why couldn't life of fame and all that?" It's like, being under complete and scrutiny for 24 hours of every day of your fucking life. Of course, they don't want them the children to be. They want to be rich because the other man made a lot of money and have another life that keeps them away from that. That's when people are surprised about that, you're like, what? And you're surprised? Why?
it made perfect sense to me because I stole that scene,
Hmm.
and I stole that scene from a conversation I had with one of my brothers.
Hmm.
Um, his daughter was about 1920, and she said to her father, I'm thinking about maybe being a cop. And my brother, he, you know, my brother never drank, uh, uh, other than malteds and ice cream sodas. Um, but I thought for sure this was going to drive him to drink, and he was beside himself. He came over. I'm walking around with him, trying to calm him down, and then saying to him, John, relax. You know, this is just a passing notion. I said, and you know, you would, when you were 18, you enlisted in the army and were fighting in Vietnam.
Hmm.
Your daughter is 19 and talking about being a cop. What's the difference? And he goes, the difference was I knew what I was doing, which is what every parent says.
About their son or daughter, exactly.
Yeah. So Peter Parker, as a teenager, would go out and risk his life.
Hmm.
But it was different. He knew what he was doing, and I even had him say that to Mary Jane. And Mary
Hmm.
Jane, of course, called him on it.
Yeah.
But people were saying, I can't believe that Peter would be so negative about that thing. And I'm thinking, yeah, wait till you have a kid.
No, that makes absolute sense. As fathers, we all think, well, we knew better. We
Yeah,
we
well,
knew
of
what we were
course.
doing. But you don't think that about your son or daughter, who are doing exactly the same thing you did.
Yeah, of course. We all look back at the younger generation and think, oh, they're not quite sure what they're doing.
Hmm.
Um, it's
Is the actual we knew better that every generation says about the next generation? Oh, we knew better. Like, but you did the same thing. Yeah, but we knew better. Then you get
but
to the next generation, they get to the dads, and they say the same thing about the next one. So it's like the cycle of life. We all know better. We all knew better, right?
yeah, except I look at a lot of the young writers and I'm thinking, boy, they actually do know better. This is ridiculous. What are they doing? They're making the rest of us look bad. All these young guys, they're doing some great shit. Oh man, this is not fair.
Well, they have good teachers. They have good masters, which was you among others. They
So,
learn from the best. So whatever they're doing is because they learn reading your stuff.
well, if they learn from me, they learn from the third or fourth best. Not even the fourth. And maybe in the top
Let's say
25.
one of the best. We'll
I
keep it
see.
in one of.
I I'm the lucky guy because I actually learned from the best.
Hmm.
I was tutored by John Goldwater at Archie Comics and Frank Doyle at Archie Comics.
Hmm.
You know, they you know they taught me how to do things. I was tutored by Joe Orlando at DC Comics.
Hmm.
I was tutored by Stan Lee. uh, I was tutored by these guys that they taught me how to do things. I was never as good as any of them, but they taught me. I learned from things from really the best.
Hmm.
Um, I sometimes I I know there's always the question, who created the Marvel Universe, Stan or Jack, and blah blah blah. And my feeling is they did it together. Without them both working together, it wouldn't have happened.
Exactly. Exactly.
Um, and people say, how creative was Stan? Well, yeah, I worked with Stan. He was damn creative.
Hmm.
In the course of 10 minutes, he'd come up with 100 ideas. and maybe 50 of them sucked.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe another 25 were, yeah, I don't know. And maybe the next 15, yeah, we could do something with that. And then the last 10, wow, there's a five ideas that you could build a whole company on here.
Mm-hmm.
And that's in just 10 minutes.
Yeah.
In 10 more minutes, it'd give you another 100.
Mm-hmm.
And you'd have to weed out the things, but just,
But that's
So-
part of the thing, when every time I get that about Jack, blah, 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 and how creative Stan was, I always say, okay, then let's talk about Ditko and when Ditko left the Spider-Man and who stayed on the book. It was Stan. So there has to be something there, because when the other creators left the book, he still made them a success and still created new ideas and new, evolved the characters, in this case Spider-Man. So telling me he had no input or creation at all just makes no sense, because he kept doing it without those other co-creators around it, right?
And Stan he imbued these characters with the soap opera and the personalities that we fell in love with.
Yeah.
I because you look at all the books, they all had the same kind of soap opera, operatic feel.
Yeah.
So that was Stan, and did Kirby design a lot of the characters, most of the characters? Absolutely. Did Ditko design a bunch of characters? Absolutely. All of these guys contribute. Don Heck, all of these guys contributed. And the biggest, they always say, where are the plots? Where are the this? Where's the that? These guys didn't think this stuff was going to last, more than 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
Stan had seen superhero comic books fail 3 or 4 times beforehand. He wasn't expecting superhero comics to last more than 2 years. He wasn't expecting to be in the business for 2 more years.
Yeah. Do you know the story about Joan telling him, if this is going to be your last hooray in comics, just go crazy?
Yeah.
Because I've been told by several people who knew Stan that story is true. That he told him, look, if you're gonna be doing this for 2 more years, just do whatever you want, and then if it doesn't work, at least you can say you tried.
Yeah, and I think he did. That's where he created the personalities and was Jack handling a lot of the plots.
Mm-hmm.
If you want to call them that. I mean, look at the plot structure of Fantastic Four #1.
Mm-hmm.
The Mole Man is underground, and he's causing cities to sink. So the Fantastic Four go and they fight the Mole Man. And the end of the issue, what do? They trap him underground where he lives, where he's causing cities to think. I'm sorry, trapping Mole Man underground. And yet, I read that issue. I was a sap for it. I always go back to the first time they introduced the Inhumans. The Inhumans are hiding out in the city because they're trying to hide out. They can't be caught by the Seeker, who's working for Maximus the Mad. And then they decide they have to leave the city. So where do they go to hide? In Maximus' castle. And who's the first person they run into in Maximus' castle? It's Maximus. I'm sorry, but if you're trying to hide from Maximus, don't move into his castle. And yet, I read those comic books. It all worked for me. The plots made no sense, but who cared?
Absolutely, but because they could keep us entertained, right? As you said before,
they kept us very entertained. I reread them today, and I can see, the plot holes in that, and I don't care. They're still very entertaining.
Yeah, that's something that I talked about a lot with kids, with the students, about storytelling. It's like sometimes even the best writer has plot holes in a story, but the most important part of it is not the plot holes, is that does he or she keep you entertained enough that you don't care? Because that's the part I care about the most. It's like, was I entertained from beginning to end? Yes. Did I notice the plot hole? Yes. But I was having so much fun I didn't care.
Listen, no Indiana Jones movie makes sense.
No, absolutely.
But they are fabulous movies, and we love them.
Mm-hmm.
So many James Bond films and Mission Impossible films and Fast and Furious films. I love all this nonsense. It's great stuff. But did any of it make any sense? No. I'm sorry.
Yesterday we were talking with a friend about that, about Spielberg, Indiana Jones, and I mentioned how little sense or no sense at all that Jurassic Park makes. No, and how he puts the scenes at certain moments, like, okay, the audience wants to see the T-Rex roar. Makes no sense that he's there. Anyway, I'll put it there. Or by the beginning, oh, how convenient that the Tyrannosaurus, that the Rex comes in, does the scenes, and we end the movie that way. So you're like, the whole movie, the whole script is convenience for him when the audience wants to see something to stay entertained. It makes no sense now, but we end the movie saying that was fun.
Yeah, it's called the willing suspension of disbelief.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, we willingly suspend disbelief because so many times with characters, you see them bounce off walls, and you go, well, he's dead. He's dead. There's no way the human body can sustain that sort of trauma, and yet he gets up and he keeps on fighting. Arnold Schwarzenegger was in a movie called was it called The Last Hero or something like that?
The last action movie.
The what?
The last action movie, the one where he comes out of the movie.
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah, the McTiernan one. Yeah.
Yeah, and I remember thinking, wow, this is a parody of all these action films, because they thought the genre was coming to an end.
Yes,
and it still hasn't ended.
It makes sense because it was John McTiernan who was the biggest, action movie director of the 90s, and it came to a point when him and Arnold were saying, "This is over. We have to do the parody." They were too ahead of the curve, and nobody liked it.
Yeah. And, in many regards, the first Die Hard movie is a parody of action movies and stuff like that.
Yeah.
It was when they started to take it seriously that they kind of lost it.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's go with some comments and questions if you want, because we have people waiting here. So Felipe González Hernandez says, "Good afternoon, Mr. DeFalco. It's a pleasure having you here. I'm a huge fan of your Fantastic Four, Spider-Girl, Green Goblin, and Spider-Man, also Thor, and other comic books."
Thank you very much.
Drink and Draw Costa Rica, from Costa Rica. "Good morning, guys. Big hello from Costa Rica to Mr. DeFalco." And Felipe González Hernandez says, "For me, Fantastic Four was wonderful with imagination and great characters. Together with Paul Ryan, you made a great team. Each month was full of ideas and was very enjoyable."
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Pedro de Mercader says, "Hello, everyone. Just wanted to thank Mr. DeFalco for his Marvel guidebooks. Those books made me understand everything I needed about the Marvel universe." How did you start doing those?
I started doing them by mistake. I was sitting in my office one day, and I get a call, and it's from this English editor. He said, "We're going to do this guidebook on Spider-Man, and the editor of Spider-Man suggested that you'd be the guy to write it." And I said, "I'm sorry, who's the editor?" "Ralph Macchio." "Okay." I said, No, I think you want Peter Sanderson. Peter Sanderson does these sort of guidebooks." And I said, No. Who told you you're the guy? And I said, "Well, let me call you back." So I called up the editor of, I called up Ralph Macchio, who's a good friend of mine.
Yeah.
And I said to Ralph, did you recommend me for a Spider-Man guidebook? He goes, yeah. I said, why'd you recommend me? He said, well, they wanted somebody who does books, and I know you write books. And I go, mystery novels. Oh, that's a whole different thing. And he says, yeah, but you've said you can't give them out to your nephews and that, because I had a bunch of young nephews. He says, hey, you could do this, or you could give it to your nephews. And I thought, yeah, okay. I said, but I've never done one of those things before. And I'm a sucker. Anytime I say I've never done this before, I know I have to try doing it.
Right.
Just to see if I can do it. So I agreed to do the book, and about halfway through the book, I realized how I should have been writing it.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, okay, I know how to do it now, so maybe I should do another one just to see if I really do know how to do it. And I forget, they offered me another one. I forget if it was, I forget which one it was. And I thought, okay, I'm going to do it just to see if I, and then again, halfway through the book, I thought, wait a minute, I have an even better way of writing these things. And they were one of my guilty pleasure kind of things. Between you and me, and I can't let any editors or producers hear this. I always like to have some projects that I do for my own stupidity. That, hey, you know what? I'm a lucky guy. I can afford to do things that, just for the hell of it. And those were projects that I did just for the hell of it, and continued to do them until I kind of ran out of time.
Mm-hmm. Were they fun to do, or you just enjoyed it because of the challenge they were?
I enjoyed it mainly for the challenge. They were a lot of work. They were a lot of work, but on the other hand, they were also a lot of fun, because I had to keep going back and rereading the old comic books,
which is never bad.
Which is never bad. So to get the essence of the individual characters. So I'd reread the old comic books, and and just had a grand old time for myself.
Mm-hmm.
There were certain projects that I just did it because, hey, they're fun. There's certain things you got to do for fun.
Mm-hmm.
I used to say to people for years that you do things either for love or money.
Mm-hmm.
I'm again an incredibly lucky guy. I've stumbled into projects that paid a lot more than I thought they would, and a lot of things worked out well for me that I never, they were not part of my life plan.
Mm-hmm.
I did not plan to be an editor-in-chief. I didn't even plan to be an editor. As a matter of fact, when I joined the Marvel editorial staff, it was only to do it for about 6 months. Things worked out for me. So, like I said, I'm a very lucky guy.
Was there ever a conflict for you between your editorial side and your writer's side when you were working on a project? Your editorial side was telling you this is wrong, or the other way around. As an editor, you were judging something, and your writer's side was saying, no, this is wrong. Did you have any conflict at all, or you could separate both sides of your career in an easy way?
The only time I had the conflict was more as a writer than as an editor. As an editor, I could a lot of times explain to a guy why something didn't work,
mm-hmm.
or why he needed to work on something. I was not always a great editor. Sometimes I would rewrite sentences, because at Archie, my job was to rewrite. If a line of dialogue or something didn't work, my job was to rewrite it. And when I started at Marvel, I thought I was supposed to do the same thing. And then later on, as time went on, learned that I should get the writers rewrite their stuff. It took me a while to learn how to be, how to be a better editor. I'd still like to be an even better editor. So as an editor, I didn't really have the problem. I would talk to the guys and say, there's some, sometimes I could put my finger on what was wrong, and sometimes I'd say, there's something not quite right here. And then we'd go through the beats of the story, and as we would go through the beats of the story, we would figure out how to get it. And I was very lucky because most of the writers I worked with were terrific, and they, but they were actually grateful for the feedback. As a writer, a number of times, I would find myself in a position where an editor would be telling me something that I knew was wrong. And I would, I remember, somebody said, we have to introduce a villain on the last page. I said, why? It says, oh, always good to introduce a villain on the last page. I said, well, but that villain isn't supposed to be in our next issue. It doesn't matter. We have that last full page shot of the villain. And I go, no, because we're not gonna use him next month. If you have if you end a book with a full page shot of a villain, he should be the villain of the next issue. I mean, and so that editor and I didn't get along. And a number of times, I'd be saying, we got to build a cast of characters around them. Oh, but nobody's interested in those that cast of characters. I'd say they're not interested because they haven't been introduced yet. They have to appear in print first before people can either like them or dislike them.
Yeah.
But we got to get them into print. Guys,
it's very difficult to have an opinion about something if you haven't been able to see it.
You haven't seen it, so I listen. I one of the things I've always taken great delight on is a book is about to come out and people are ripping it apart before it's been printed. And now here's a boring story from the past. So the word gets out that Spider-Man's going to change his costume. The fan press is furious. Fanzines are ripping us apart. Everybody hates us because we're going to change Spider-Man's costume. At one point, the guy from the mailman room comes in and takes a sack of mail and drops it on my desk and says, I don't know what you did, but don't you ever do it again. All right? Jim Shooter comes in and says, what issue is Spider-Man getting his new costume? And I used to know the number, but I don't know it anymore. And he says, well, get rid of it in the following issue. And I said, we can't do that because he's actually supposed to get it in Secret Wars. So we should at least wait until issue, the corresponding thing, the same month.
And he was the writer on Secret Wars.
He was the writer. But he said, get rid of it. Everybody hates it. Everybody hates it. I said, they haven't seen it yet. And I convinced him. And he said to me, well, listen, if sales on Spider-Man go down, it's your butt and you'll be fired for it. And I said, okay. I thought, yeah, I'm going to get fired off Spider-Man anyway, so what do I care? And then 252, that was the number, comes out. And suddenly everybody loves the costume. And suddenly we're getting mail about how good the costume is and everything else.
And of course, it was the same people who were saying, oh, how much I love it, and forgetting they hated it before.
And then later on, at one point, Shooter comes in and says, I hear you're getting rid of the costume. I said, yeah, you told me to get rid of the costume. He says, what are you, crazy? It's the most popular thing we've done. What issue, are you getting rid of the costume? I said, the one that just left house. He said, get back that costume. I have found that, when the fans hate you, that's when your sales are the best.
Mm-hmm.
I often look at Fantastic Four. We used to get such hate mail on that book because they hated what we were doing with the characters, but sales would go up every month.
Mm-hmm.
And I said to a guy who would write these reviews about how horrible the book was. And I said, you write every month. You write how horrible the book is. Why do you keep reading it? He says, "Oh, because I have to know what happens." I said, "Well, keep reading and tell all your friends to hate the book too."
There's something really weird about that when they tell you, it's like, "Oh, I hate it, but I have to keep seeing, knowing what happens." Like, then you don't hate it because you want to see what's happening. I'm sorry, but then you don't hate it. It's you need to see it. It's because you're interested in what's happening.
You're curious, and I don't know about you, but there have been times when I've started to read a book or started to read a comic book, and I'm thinking, yeah, this is not for me.
Absolutely.
I usually stop.
Yeah.
I don't go out. Why?
Yeah.
There are certain sports that I don't watch because I'm not interested in them.
Absolutely. I always give the Sex and the City as an example. I remember when my wife started to watch it many years ago, and I was sitting right by her, and I just said, "I see this is a good show. It's well made. This is not for me," and I just stopped.
That's how it works.
Mm-hmm. If you're curious about what's happening next, you don't hate it. I'm sorry, but that guy didn't hate it.
And I've always been fascinated by comic book fans, because if you say to them, "Hey, do you read Spider-Girl?" "No, I don't read Spider-Girl," and they'll give you all the reasons why they don't read Spider-Girl. Where if I say to you, "Hey, do you watch hockey?" and you say, "Nah, not interested," and that's the end of the discussion. Yeah. You don't have to give me a bunch of reasons. You go, "Yeah, not interested." All right, okay, that's good.
But that's like the part of the toxic fandom that we have now, especially in Star Wars, but also in other art forms, when they need to show you how much they own those characters. As you said before about the hatred, I remember people hating like crazy Star Wars: The Force Awakens with the trailer. Not even the trailer. So the teaser, the first teaser, they saw the teacher, they watched the teaser, like, "Oh my God, I hate that movie. It's gonna be so bad." Like, you just watch a 38-second teaser. How can you hate it?
And sometimes the teasers have the best stuff in the movie.
That's also true.
Force Awakens, is that the one where Luke Skywalker? Which one's Force Awakens?
It's the first one of the J.J. Abrams, the episode 7, the first one with Rey.
All right. Okay, because it was the next one that a lot of people didn't like.
Yeah, including myself. Last Jedi.
All right. Well, that one, I heard why people didn't like it, and I said, "Oh, because Luke did exactly what all the other Jedi Masters had done."
No, I didn't. I'm also a structure guy like you are, and I didn't like it. Honestly, there's an easy reason. It's like it doesn't fit with the first movie, doesn't fit with the third at all. It's like he just said, like, "Oh, I am a part of a trilogy. I don't give a shit. I'm just going to tell my own story that doesn't match at all the full story we're telling." So that's why I hate it. Like, this doesn't fit at all. It's like not the same movie, and I'm being told something, and then I'm being told the opposite. So, and it's not even part of the plot that, "Oh, I'm telling you the opposite, but you're going to understand why." No. He just didn't care. Like, no, but this is my story. I don't give a shit. So but when people tells me that, "Oh, I hate it because blah, 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 blah," it's like, wait, will you leave me alone? I don't have to like it, and I don't have, if you like it, that's good. I'm not even going to argue with you. It's called taste. And I'm fine with it. But when they have to tell you why they hate it for like 15 minutes, you're like, are you sure you hate it? Because if you spend 15 minutes explaining why, maybe you like it more than you think.
Yeah. I sometimes think that I don't want to be a Marvel guy because I've worked for DC. I like the DC characters. I want all the DC movies to be great.
Yeah.
Because, hey, I'm paying to go see them. I want, well, actually, I don't pay to go see them anymore. And may never pay to go see another DC movie unless they change. But, some of these things I just looked and thought, I have no idea what the heck's going on. I have no idea what's going on. And I'm, somebody was trying to explain to me Batman versus Superman. Oh, they cut out these scenes that explain everything. Well, okay, but the movie I saw didn't have those scenes, so I got lost in the beginning, and once I'm lost,
doesn't matter. The director's cut, it's the same shit. I watched the director cut, and they're like, "Oh, it does this and that." Like, yeah, it does something that we already knew. No, but no. Everything else that didn't work, it's not added. It's something that we already knew. They give it more detail, so we already knew it. So everything else that didn't work is still the same.
Well, here's what I missed in Batman Superman. They have the initial scene where Lois is held hostage. And then after Superman rescues her, they have congressional hearings. I didn't understand why they were having congressional hearings. I didn't realize that they thought Superman had killed all those guys. Because Superman routinely uses bullets to kill people.
Yep.
Because they were all shot in the head. So that... And I'm sorry, they gave me, these bodies were burned and that sort of stuff. And I'm thinking, okay, they're burned. There's still bullet holes in the skull. Somebody should have said, well, because, these congressional hearings are being told because Superman slaughtered a bunch of people. At least then I understand why they were having them.
Yeah, but that's, like everything that they toss there. Like, why they did? No, I don't care. Like, oh, that guy, that photographer who dies, that's Jimmy Olsen. Why would you introduce Jimmy Olsen to kill him in 5 seconds? Just to screw with your audience? Then I don't like what I'm seeing. I don't like to be screwed with, Batman goes around killing people with his car. Everybody who finds around, he just kills them with his, with his machine guns in his car. Why?
Yeah.
It's Batman. He's Batman. He should know how to do it without killing anybody. No, he just kills people. It's like, this is not Man of Steel. Said, maybe that's a nice story, but I'm sorry, that's not Superman. I mean, if I'm supposed to watch a Superman movie, this is not the one I want to watch.
No. Man of Steel. The first time Superman flies in at super speed and punches somebody through a wall, I thought, wow. I've waited my whole life to see that. Around the 50th time, I was on my phone ordering Chinese food for after the film.
Yeah.
And the other Superman movie, Superman Returns, I'm watching that film, and Peter Wilson, early in the film, they're in the space shuttle. And they have this woman, Peter Wilson, is the attendant in the space thing. And she's one of the most gorgeous women in the world. She used to be on a show, La Femme Nikita.
Yeah.
You could drop her in a lake full of mud and she'd get up looking gorgeous. I'm looking in the film and I'm thinking, what have they done to her makeup? And I'm studying her makeup. And I realize something has already knocked me out of the film because I'm first 5 minutes of the film, and suddenly I'm paying attention to an actress's makeup.
Yeah.
And I thought, I don't give a shit about makeup. I don't, this is not in my wheelhouse. What has knocked me out of that film? I've always intended to go back to see that film because it had a great theme as far as I was concerned. If it's okay to be a deadbeat dad if you have a really cool job. That would seem to be the theme of that movie. And yes, I was being sarcastic about a great theme.
I know, that's what I was laughing.
Yeah, everything about that film was wrong.
I remember. Let me know if you agree. I remember the first time I talked about this movie about Superman Returns with Mark Waid, and he said that he made the same mistake with Kingdom Come. He said the first thing why I couldn't, like that movie is that Superman would never quit. And he said, and I made the same mistake with Kingdom Come. I made Superman quit. Superman would never quit. The moment you have as your premise that Superman quit, nobody cares.
Yeah. That's throughout the movie. He's saying to Lois, "I'll never leave you. I'll always be here. You were just gone for 15 years. What the hell are you talking about?"
Like, do I have to believe you after 15 fucking years? Not 5 months, 15 years.
Yeah, I mean, come on. What kind of nonsense is this? And his kid gets superpowers, and what does he do the first time he uses his powers? He kills somebody. We refer to that as a supervillain, not a superhero.
Let's just say Aquaman is fun.
Yeah, Aquaman is halfway there.
Yeah, with a huge mistake. I don't know if you agree, but the beginning of the movie, when he does, the dad of the villain, he lets him die. Like, yeah, you're bad. I'm just going to let you die. And that moment, I was in the theater and I yelled to my wife and somebody, of course, in the theater says, "Be quiet." And they were right. I just yelled, "Okay, you just justified and made the bad guy the good guy because you just let him see you seeing your bad guy die, and you're supposed to be a hero."
Yeah, and well, Aquaman had a number of other problems to me because I felt like it was the third movie of the series early on because things were happening in the film that I couldn't, they were referring to things that I had no idea what was going on. All the way at the end of the film, suddenly those things made sense. But I'm sorry, I'm watching it from the beginning of the film forward. Give me a fighting chance.
Yeah, and it's supposed to be happening before. Yeah. What we saw in Justice League or one another, I don't remember. He was not supposed to be in the same order, and I was like, wait. The thing that I like about the Marvel movies is that they always move forward. Supposed to be 3 months, 6 months later. Every single movie, except when they tell you, like, no, that movie happened in the past because of this reason. Like at the Marvel. On those ones, I'm always wondering, okay, when did it happen? Is Shazam supposed to be in the same universe? Supposed to be when? Before, after, or Aquaman? When did this happen? And then you realize, no. Now they're saying it was supposed to happen like 2 years ago before Justice League. And you're like, I'm sorry, that makes no sense.
Yes, listen, this is the movie I'm watching. This movie has to make sense from beginning, middle, and end. And I shouldn't have to have watched any other movies. I'm watching this one.
Yep. This is what we said before about the comics. You shouldn't have to read issue 3, issue 4. If you're in issue 11, you have to understand issue 11 by itself, right?
You have to. You have to. That's our craft.
Yeah.
If it's one sentence here, one sentence there, you can fill that stuff in.
Absolutely. Felipe Gonzalez asked you about Fantastic Four. Did you have planned the entire 60-issue run and its conclusion? I have to say that I love the disappearance of Reed Richards and how the group had to deal with it, the special issue.
We did not plan out 60 issues. I think at most we were maybe 4 or 5 issues from where we were at any given time. Paul Ryan was a workhorse, and he'd sit down every day, do his pencils, but he was always nervous about the next plot on his desk, and he always felt he needed at least 1 or 2 plots on his desk. So I always had to stay 2 plots ahead of Paul. So maybe we were 7 or 8 issues ahead of the readers, knowing where we were going. But it wasn't like we planned everything out. I will tell everybody I am a devout coward. Anytime I'm working on a story arc, I always know how it's going to end. I don't have the courage to start a book if I don't know how it ends. You know, we can ad-lib and make changes along the way, but
yes.
You know.
Drink and Draw Costa Rica asks, what was it like to have Hasbro approach you to relaunch G.I. Joe and Transformers? You introduced Transformers to the US and in my case to Costa Rica too.
G.I. Joe, you know, G.I. Joe was a dream job. I mean, Hasbro came in, they wanted us to do a comic book. They wanted, you know, they showed us the figure. They said, this is G.I. Joe. And then he becomes a frogman. He becomes, you know, all the different characters. We looked at it and said, no, that doesn't work. It's got to be a bunch of guys. And, you know, and they need a villain. So what did they need a villain for? So they have somebody to fight.
Yeah.
And we, you know, G.I. Joe, I'd say 99% of G.I. Joe is Larry Hama. Archie Goodwin came up with Cobra Command. You know, I proofread, you know, and changed some of Larry's dialogue, which I should have done. But you know, so much of G.I. Joe was just Larry Hama, you know, working on, you know, working on the characters, working on the, you know, we decided to come up with these Marvel Universe entries, which they then later decided to put on the toys. And that was all Larry. Larry was doing all the work. Like I said, I just got to look at what Larry's doing and say, nicely done. You know, Larry Hama is one of the great, you know, great geniuses and super talented guys of our industry. Archie Goodwin also, who came up with Cobra Command. Transformers, I got involved, you know, much later on. You know, I always remember the meeting with Transformers is they had us sign all sorts of non-disclosure agreements. And then they put the Transformers things on our desk, on our table, the conference room table. And when they put the first Transformer on the table, I looked up and saw Larry Hama across the table. And we smiled at each other and said, could you excuse us a minute? And then we ran back to our offices and we came back with the Japanese toys. Because we had already bought the Japanese Transformers from Forbidden Planet. So, you know, I said, yeah, we got these toys. You can't have those toys. We do have these toys. You know, again, a very fun project. Transformers is you know, mainly Bob Budiansky, again, and you know, a very talented guy. Bob is a terrific writer. Most people know about Bob as a terrific writer. He was also a great artist. He worked on Ghost Rider for me for a bunch of issues. He was just fabulous. I love Bob's artwork.
Felipe Paula Trades, hello everybody. Hello to you. Felipe asks, how do you remember this time with more additional FF series like Unlimited or Fantastic Force? I really like the idea of growing Franklin up and having his own group.
Oh, well, that was a Fantastic Force. We decided to have the Unlimited book because, you know, I am a Roy Thomas geek. I love Roy Thomas's work. I often think, you know, Roy Thomas is, you know, he's a giant in this industry, and the rest of us are little people. You know, and I was working on Fantastic Four, and Roy at one point was looking for something to do, and I thought, well, he should be writing Fantastic Four. And thought, I said to my editor, why don't we get Roy to do Fantastic Four? He says, because sales keep going up on your thing. And I said, well, maybe we can do a second Fantastic Four book. So we did Fantastic Four Unlimited, so I could get to read Roy Thomas's Fantastic Four. And somewhere along the line, somebody made a joke because we had done X-Force.
Mm-hmm.
We had New Mutants, we had done X-Force, and sales like quadrupled or something from New Mutants to X-Force. And someone had proposed or said something, we should do the same thing with the Fantastic Four and come out with Fantastic Force. And somehow it had gotten, the fan press heard about it. And they were outraged. How could you cancel Fantastic Four and come out with Fantastic Force and all this other stuff and blah, blah, blah. And I remember looking at that going, you know what? We should come out with a book called Fantastic Force. Except, in addition to the Fantastic Four. And we had done that thing where we had Franklin grow up. Thought, hey, here's the perfect opportunity. So we'll create some more characters and having a whole new team. So it was kind of a joke that got out of hand. and Tom Brevoort wrote it. I thought it was a pretty fun book.
Mm-hmm.
Had a lot of fun stuff going on.
Mm-hmm. Lofran Hoa says, why did you have so many changes of opinion about who was Hobgoblin during your era in Amazing Spider-Man? It seems like you guys weren't in complete agreement about who would be.
Yes and no. When Roger Stern first started working on Hobgoblin, I said let's keep it a mystery like the Green Goblin. And Roger said, okay, but I'm not going to tell anybody, not even you. And I said, okay, well, I'm going to keep a suspect list. And when you're ready to reveal it, I'll tell you whether or not you got the answer correct. And Roger and I, went ahead. And then at a certain point, Roger was relieving Spider-Man, and he said, well, you're going to be writing Hobgoblin, so I'm going to tell you who I think Hobgoblin is. And I said, okay, who do you think Hobgoblin is? And, Roger Kingsley's evil twin. And I said, no, we're not going to do an evil twin kind of bullshit. No, forget about it. I said, Roger, I'm going to come up with somebody else. He says, well, you're the writer now. It's up to you. I said, okay. So from that point on, actually even before that point, I knew who I thought Hobgoblin was. And, as long as I was writing it, that's who Hobgoblin was going to be.
Mm-hmm.
At one point, we had gotten a new editor, and the new editor, I didn't trust the new editor because he liked to keep talking to the fan press and revealing things to the fan press. So at one point, he insisted that I tell him who the Hobgoblin was. And he did it while there was a reporter in the room. So how long would that secret have lasted? Now, I got him to at least kick the reporter out of the room. But I thought, I don't trust this guy. So I gave him a lie.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember I said this, so-and-so is the Hobgoblin. Ron Frenz is sitting next to me. And Ron popped up and looked at me. Right. Went like this, and he put his head down on the desk because he didn't want any part of that. And that was good because armed with who he thought was the Hobgoblin, the editor then did a Spider-Man versus Wolverine book, and killed off that suspect. And then, as far as I'm concerned, screwed up the end of the Hobgoblin saga. But that's me. That's sour grapes.
Mm-hmm.
Every writer has things that he wished some editor hadn't screwed up. I'm sure all of my writers have things that they wish I hadn't screwed up.
Mm-hmm. Mhm.
That's the biz.
Okay. Mr. DeFalco says, Pedro Monge says, Mr. DeFalco, hi, it's always an honor listening to you. I guess this may have been asked many times, but how do you remember the decision of unmasking Alicia as an Skrull? Whose was that idea?
That idea was actually an idea that came up between Ralph Macchio and Mark Grunwald.
Mhm.
A few of us were, Ralph had a swimming pool, and a few of us were at his house at his swimming pool. And Ralph and Mark were talking about the Fantastic Four. And they didn't like the fact that Johnny was marrying Alicia.
Mhm.
And they said, well, blah, 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 blah. What if Alicia's a Skrull? And they asked me, what do I think? And I said, not my book. I really don't care. Because at the time I was not editor-in-chief. It was none of my concern. I was reading the book, and I was enjoying what I was reading. And I didn't think Johnny would marry Alicia. That didn't make any sense to me, or that Alicia would suddenly fall for Johnny. But the rest of the book, I was enjoying the book. I liked the artwork, liked the writing. Didn't like that character bit. Years passed, and suddenly I find myself put in a position where I was offered a chance to write Fantastic Four. And I thought, oh, okay, I got to come up with some ideas. And I remembered the idea of Alicia being a Skrull. So I went to Ralph and I said, ba, 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 and Alicia's a Skrull. And he goes, that's brilliant. And I go, yeah, you came up with it. And he didn't remember the idea. And I told Grooney liked the idea. I said, you guys came up with it. He said, oh, no, I don't remember that. I said, yeah, I actually remember sitting at the pool when you guys came up with it. I got to give credit to those guys. They came up with it.
Mm-hmm.
And Alicia, here's the thing with Alicia. We introduce Alicia. She's supposed to be there for a couple of issues, and then she's supposed to, get killed, sacrificing herself for the Fantastic Four. But she proved so popular that we had to bring her back. And she remained very popular.
Mm-hmm. Okay, Felipe asks, you expanded the universe in Spider-Girl was a great contribution, and I love the Fantastic Five and Dark Devil. Would there have been more characters or miniseries in the future?
Probably.
Mm-hmm.
The miniseries, the first couple of miniseries started to come out because big talent guys were supposed to deliver projects, and they didn't. And they needed a miniseries.
Mm-hmm.
So they came to us, and then Spider-Girl, I know the belief is that Spider-Girl never sold. Yeah, Marvel published a book for 13 years that didn't sell, right? Okay, yeah, all right.
Yeah, let's take that nonsense out of the way. Yes.
Let's take that out, all right? Yeah, what happened with Spider-Girl and sales was that in the direct market, sales only go down. So sales department would look at a book, and they'd be able to accurately predict when the sales would go down and the book wouldn't sell. So that they would figure out when to cancel the book. So they'd look at Spider-Girl and they'd say, well, based on your sales, in 10 issues, it's going to go down. We're going to cancel the book. 10 issues would go by and they'd look and they go, wait a minute, sales went up. Can you do 6 more issues? Because then sales will go down and then we can cancel the book. Okay, we can do 6 more issues. And they kept asking for 6 more and 6 more. So sales never went down.
Mm-hmm.
It's always consistent. And because we were always consistent sales, they always knew about what they were going to get, except when sales would would blip up. Every time people heard that Spider-Girl was going to get canceled, sales blipped up. So we kept blipping up. So at one point they said, we need a limited series. Is there any way you guys can produce a limited series in this amount of time? We said, yeah. So we did it. And it sold well. And as a result, they kept asking us to do limited series.
Mm-hmm.
So we would have kept on doing Spider-Girl limited series.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Radix says 55. I started reading comics when I was 12 in 2007, and it took time for me to get excited. It wasn't until I started reading trades of older 80s stories that I understood the 22-page pacing.
Oh, okay. Well, I don't know what to tell him. Good. Great.
You're right, Radix. Let's just say you're right. Let's go.
Yes.
How did you come up with the idea of the Green Goblin Phil Ulrich? Sorry. The truth is that there was a difference between his appearance in Spider-Man and his regular series. I love the character and cast.
They're. I don't know how we came up with the idea. It's hard to remember how you came up with the idea. Somebody said, let's do a Green Goblin book.
Mm-hmm.
And I started batting my head against the wall, and that's what came out.
Mm-hmm.
I think that the first Spider-Man appearance, I produced the Bible, and the guy doing the Spider-Man read the Bible, but it wasn't until I actually started, typing the character that his personality really came out.
Mm-hmm.
So he based it upon the Bible and was accurate to the Bible, but Phil ended up having a really weird personality. It was because the artist had such a distinctive way of drawing that I could only come up with this weird personality to deal with the artist's distinctive way of drawing.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a goofball book, and I love doing goofball books.
That was fun.
Yeah, that one in GIJoe are my two fun goofball books.
Okay. Pedro Mercader asks you, do you think Spider-Man can grow old, or he has to be always the 20-something guy?
Yeah, I thought Spider-Man could continue to grow. I thought that if it had been up to me, I never would let him get out of high school. Then I wouldn't have let him graduate. But once he got married, the marriage worked, and I thought, he could have a kid, because being married and having a kid, all that does is add responsibility on you. And I used to say that Spider-Man is a series all about responsibility. Mm-hmm. and dealing with responsibility. So as many responsibilities as you could throw onto Peter Parker, the more you pile them on, the better the series would be. So I thought Peter could grow old and could grow older and have young kids. I thought that you don't want him to get too old. Mm-hmm. But I thought at one point we were talking about Aunt May passing away and Mary Jane being pregnant. So you replace one responsibility with an even greater responsibility.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Pedro Monge asked, how do you remember the exit of the Image guys back in the day? Did somebody at Marvel saw it coming?
No, we didn't see it coming. I first became aware of it like kind of the night before it was announced. There was supposed to be I think it's Sotheby's that we're going to have a big comic book auction. And I was supposed to meet the president of the company, but I didn't know if I was supposed to meet him at Sotheby's or meet him at the office. So about 6:30, 7 o'clock at night, I'm getting ready to go home. I figured I'd stop up in his office and ask them, where are we supposed to meet tomorrow? And I walked in, there are the Image guys there, and they're discussing things with the president of the company. They're asking, they want, they wanted a number of concessions. So the president wrangled me into the meeting. I got stuck in the meeting, which went for another 2.5 hours or something like that. And they were all over the place asking for all sorts of stuff. And the president said one of the few things that I agreed with him. He said, why don't you guys get together and write a list of what you want instead of just throwing out random ideas? Write a list of what you want, and then we'll see what we can give you and what we can, and we'll negotiate. And they said fine. And I said, terrific. And the next day, I saw one of the Image guys at Sotheby's, and I walked up to him because, hey, I got stuck there till 9:30 at night. I was going to go home at 7 o'clock. And I walked up to him, and he's basically announcing Image Comics to a reporter. And I said to him, wait a minute, you're announcing Image Comics? He said, yeah, we had already decided to do that. I said, then what was last night? He said, well, we had to go to Marvel so that we could say in our press we approached Marvel. And I said, well, that's kind of crummy. I said, but, I don't mind you, sticking the president of the company, making him stay till 9:30, but couldn't you have given me the high sign so I could have gotten out of there 2 hours early? I mean, it's one thing to jerk him around. Why'd you jerk me around? He said, well, we're sorry. We really should have let you go, but we had to do it for the press. So this way we could say, we spoke to you, we spoke to the other guy. I said, all right, well, good luck. And, I always thought that, with Marvel, people would achieve a certain level of fame and then they would leave Marvel. Mm-hmm. Most of the time they would leave Marvel to go to DC. And then, somebody used to say they build up credit at Marvel and they'd squander it at DC. But these guys were forming their own company and that sort of stuff. And I said, good for them. I thought at the time, and I will confess this, that because of who was involved and the egos of some of the people involved, I did not think it was going to last. I'm happy to see that I was wrong. Mm-hmm. And I give them a lot of credit. They went out. They wanted to do a creator-owned company. They did. They kept their promises to people. They did well.
Mm-hmm. How did the idea of sorry?
Well, here's a strange thing.
Yes, please.
After the Image guys, the sales of Marvel Comics, the books they were on go up or down.
I know. Yeah, I know. I wasn't as involved as I am today with the industry, but I know that the numbers. I remember who was the first guy who told me. It was Bob Harris. Harris was the first guy who told me about when we were working together when he was out of Marvel and he was working for Jim at Wildstorm, doing and all that. We met in San Diego, and he told me about the legend that the Marvel sales went down. He was like, no, the Marvel went up with these numbers, and I was like, Jesus Christ! And people keep thinking it went down. No, it didn't. It didn't happen. Well, good for everybody, I guess.
That's because everybody hated Marvel at the time because we drove off the Image things. They hated us so much they had to buy more comics.
Yeah, that's how it works. As we said before, you spend 15 minutes saying about something that you don't like, and that means you maybe like it.
Yeah.
So I guess that people didn't hate Marvel that much as they kept saying. How did you guys have the idea? Love from Howard. How did you guys have the idea of the New Warriors, and why they debuted in your Thor book before they did it in their own series?
All right. So when I became editor-in-chief, I got hold of Mark Romuald, and I said, listen, we're in the publishing biz, but we don't act like we're in the publishing biz. Mm-hmm. We have to come up with a 3-year plan. And Mark said, well, what's a 3-year plan? We've got to basically figure out what we're going to do over the next 3 years.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, we work out a 3-year plan, we work out a 5-year plan, because I said in publishing, if you're thinking only 3 years ahead, you're thinking short-term thinking, because you know, most real publishers, they know what books they're coming out with for the next 3 or 4 years. You know, as long as we keep our deadlines, they'll come out with those books. Anyway, so I said, you know, since at that time the majority of our readership were teenagers, I said, we have to come out with a teenage teen book, and we're going to come out with a teenage teen book in the a year from now, and the following year we're going to spin off at least one of those characters into his own title. So we had worked this out, and he said, "So what's the teenage book?" I don't know. We'll come up with something. So, you know, at one point, you know, we're coming up with ideas, and you know, I worked out the idea for New Warriors, and then I passed it through. We had an approval process, so I passed it through, and everybody said, "Okay, let's do the New Warriors," and blah blah blah. And they said, you know, the sales department said, "This thing is never going to sell. There's no way we can give this book away. Nobody cares about teenagers. You have to introduce it in some other book first. You have to introduce it." So you know, Ron Frenz and I, we really liked the things, and we said, "Okay, we'll introduce it. Don't worry about it." And you know, we really wanted to do the book, but you know, I didn't. You know, there's only so many hours in a day.
Yeah.
And you know, and in those days I was working 15-hour days, you know, 7 days a week.
So that was enough.
Yeah, I shouldn't say 7 days a week. I used to take an hour off for lunch to watch the first half of a football game, you know, on Sundays.
Okay.
Anyway, so you know, we assigned Danny Fingeroth as the editor, and he got Fabian and Mark Bagley to do the book. Now, here's where I'm furious. That freaking Fabian wrote that book better than I could have, and I think that's a sign of great disrespect, and I've never forgiven him for that. He should have done a worse job than I did, but he did a much better job than I could have. And Mark Bagley, man, he drew the shit out of those characters, and I'm angry at him too. So, you know,
we'll let them know. Ramsey Hassan says, in the 60s and 70s, superheroes used to be just one of the many genres Marvel and DC produce. Now it's all they do. Do you think they need to expand, I guess, in terms of the genres, to bring in readers from Boom and Image?
From Boom and Image? No. They need to bring in readers who aren't reading comic books. Forget about Boom and Image. They need all sorts of different things. You know, again, back in the day, that's why we did Star Comics, to build the stepladder for young kids to get used to reading comic books. That's why we did, you know, things like the Nam and Semper Fi, and that's why we're doing magazines. You know, we're trying to do all sorts of different kinds of comics, different types of genres, different things. You know, over the years, you know, the companies have gotten back, you know. Excuse me again.
Don't worry.
Oh Christ. Oh, a blast from a past. A famous comic book guy was on the phone. I got to call him back now. Yeah, they started to do superhero comics, and that's what they're, you know, they've been doing for a long time now. They're starting to branch out again with Star Wars and Conan and a number of other things. And I think just keep branching out and just keep trying a lot of different things. And forget about the boom market or the image market. Those people know about Marvel Comics, and they either are buying Marvels or they're not buying Marvels. I always wanted to get the people who weren't buying comic books.
Yes, absolutely.
It's such
we call in Spain. Don't keep trying to go for the core, as we call it, the core audience. That is the people we already have. Go for the ones we don't have, because there's a lot out there we don't have.
Yeah, there's fantasy fantasy novels are selling terrific these days. Get back into fantasy. Space opera is back. Let's do other space operas besides Star Wars. Let's do a bunch of things. Comic books can do any kind of thing.
That's true. There's no limit. Yeah. Radiac55 says, what you and the Spider-Girl team did was my favorite end for Spider-Man and Peter Parker and MJ. Your run is the longest running female-led book in Marvel. What a milestone. I loved what you and Ron did in ASM, Amazing Spider-Man. It was a fantastic read. 259 being my personal favorite. MJ's Secret Origin. Is it true that Roger Stern has some ideas that you later implemented for MJ?
Say that again?
Is it true that Roger Stern had some ideas that you later implemented for MJ?
I
guess she means for her Secret Origin.
Yeah, no. That I don't remember Roger and I ever discussing Mary Jane, and certainly nothing that we used in the origin. Roger used to look at Mary Jane as the spoiler. Peter's life would be going great. Mary Jane would show up, she'd spoil everything, and then she'd leave again.
One thing I just noticed when you got that phone call, we've been at this for 2 hours and 15 minutes. Okay. So I am guessing you need to go back to your life. Or you want to answer a couple more questions? What do you want to do?
I'll answer a couple more questions and then.
As I said, and it's lunchtime for you. That's also something important. So
okay.
That's why I was getting worried for you to, just let me know when you need to just say goodbye. Okay, no problem at all.
Okay.
I love from Howard says, how did you leave your at the time where Jim Lee, Todd McFarlane, and Rob, they rose up to be stars? Were they really difficult in terms of? I'm trying to translate it and sound not rose. Were they difficult in terms of following a script?
No, they were all professionals. Listen, these. Yeah, I know at the time there was all this cantankerousness in the fan press, but you got to understand, these guys were our buddies before they left. They were our buddies after they left. I mean, every time I see, Rob, I run in and I throw my arms around him because I've always loved Rob Liefeld. I admire Jim Lee's artwork. And I'm always happy to see him. And Todd and I, we always batted heads and argued about silly things. But Todd is a great guy. I mean, these, they were our friends beforehand. They were friends after. Here's a secret behind comics. One time, a couple of us were at a comic book convention, and Todd came walking up the hallway with his wife and his baby. So naturally, all of us are gooing over the baby and playing with the baby and that sort of stuff. And then panels get out and fans start coming out. And Todd looks up and he sees the fans are coming out and going to see him with a bunch of Marvel guys cooing over his baby. So, I looked and Todd looked and I jumped up and Todd says to me, "And I'll never work for Marvel again. And we'll never take you back again." And then he gave me a wink and we walked our separate ways. But hey, come on, it's show business.
Yes. And much love from Panama. Riddick says, could you share, because he was asking for some behind the scenes stuff from your AC times as editor in chief. We have been doing that for 2 hours, just so you know. And if you could share some of what you remember of Mark's planning of Squadron Supreme.
Oh, I really can't share much of that because Mark brought it in and showed me what he had, and we did, we futzed a little with the plot here and there, but that was all Mark. That's 100% Mark. He just brought it in, and I thought it was great.
Francisco says, "Hi Tom, how did you guys take it at Marvel when guys like John Byrne and Frank Miller left to go to the distinguished competition? I guess that meant for you guys that you had, to step up. Did you get mad at any of those guys for leaving?"
No. Frank was a buddy. Frank used to come to my house for Thanksgiving. He still came. John. When John left, a lot of people, there was we were all sad to see John go, but we understood why he went at the time. And then, after I became editor-in-chief, both Frank and John came back. So
yeah, it was just a part of the cycle, right?
Yeah, guys go back and forth.
Why did you guys decided to do that suit for Sue Richards that was so 90s? Maybe because of how the other characters in the mutant books dressed?
Something like that. We had come up with this story that she was possessed by was it Malice or something?
Malice, yeah.
And I said to Paul, we got to play fair with the readers. We have to give them some visual clue. And Paul said to me, okay, I got a visual clue that'll, I'm going to redesign her costume and really, it's going to be so obvious that, we won't be able to carry the story for long. I said, okay, well, then do it. And he did it, and nobody got it. So, we were always trying different things.
Absolutely. Really says, I think that my favorite stories come from continuing Peter and MJ's life and how they grew up as a couple in Spider-Girl, expecting an omnibus soon. If you can make some noise for that. Is there an omnibus coming soon?
I'm not aware of any omnibus.
No, I'm not either. But let's hope there is one.
I know they've done these paperback collections. So the third one is supposed to be released. As long as they keep selling. Yeah, I don't think there are going to be any omnibuses in my work.
But would you like to have an omnibus of 13 years of work on the Spider-Girl?
Why not? I don't. Anytime they reprint the stuff, I take the book and I put it. I have a special section where I keep all my books, or a lot of the books, and I'm always thrilled whenever they do it. I don't know. I don't really worry about that stuff.
Okay, and the last one again. It's close to 2 hours and 30 minutes. So last one from the fans and then one by me, and I'll let you go before your wife calls me because she knows where I am. Start yelling at me. If this start lighting, it could be probably Tom's wife. Anyway, he says, speaking of Spider-Girl, was it controversial to follow up on Peter as a married man and a young father? And then he asks a separate thing. Would love to know what you can say about the 90s clone saga, such as Peter being the clone, etc.
All right.
Oh, that face. That face.
Well, with Spider-Girl, no, because, the first Spider-Girl story was supposed to be a one-shot. So what if? I always refer to it as the first, but it was supposed to be the first, one and only Spider-Girl story. And it was for What If. That was my title. I was writing What If at the time, so so nobody really cared that Peter was married and older and everything, and because that thing sold so well, and they decided to do a series. It was just part of the DNA of the book. They knew Peter was going to be an older married man who had given up that. With the Clone Saga, we always knew that ultimately Peter Parker was the real guy. We had kind of set it up as kind of like a 3-act play. We didn't know he was going to be called Ben at the time, but the clone comes back. Ultimately we find out that the clone is the real guy. And the clone takes over. Peter, Mary Jane, and their baby go off to live happily ever after. Then tragedy strikes, and Peter has to come back. It's always the way the story was going to go. Did we say this was going to be a permanent thing? It's going to be the clone? Yeah, of course. Of course we do. Yeah, of course. Of course we're trying to convince everybody. Yes, Ben is going to be. Oh, yes, it's always going to be Ben. Oh, yes, of course it's going to be Ben. And the plan later on would be that we'd have a Spider-Man book with a married Peter Parker and a baby, and a Scarlet Spider book. We didn't know it was going to be called that, with a single Peter Parker kind of character. So the people who wanted Peter Parker single, there's a single Peter Parker. Want to marry? There's the married. We got both. It was essentially going to be another Spider book, just like Thor and Thunderstrike. As Guardian, Earth hero, Earth adventures. Iron Man, War Machine. That was basically the plan. What got screwed up is the marketplace. The marketplace hit a big bump in the road. The Return of Superman did not sell anywhere near as well as the Death of Superman. A lot of the Image comics that people were investing in did not sell through. A bunch of other companies came out, didn't sell through, and the marketplace hit a dip. The marketplace was down like 35%. Marvel was only up 15%, but Marvel decided to make a change. They made a brilliant decision. They fired me as editor-in-chief, which I thought, so horrible. Now I can go back to being full-time writing. And then they decided that they were going to buy their own distributor, which was a really stupid idea. And then they decided we were doing 120 titles, all of which were making money for us and everybody else down the line. We're going to cut that down to 60 titles because those 60 titles will sell twice as well and our profits will be up. Another very stupid idea. And they almost destroyed the comic book industry. But two groups of titles started to recover. And that was the Spider-Man books with the Clone Saga and the X books. When Marvel announced that they were buying their own distributor, sales on everything every Marvel title fell down 60% that month. Now, people often blame that on the Clone Saga. Oh, the Clone Saga was so bad that it killed sales on Spider-Man. Yes, it also killed sales on on Captain America and Fantastic Four and Ghost Rider. No, had nothing to do with the Clone Saga. Had to do with Marvel buying its own distributor. And because the Clone Saga was selling, and it was selling, the powers that be decided that they were going to stretched the story out a lot longer than it was supposed to stretch. We became a streaming service.
Mm-hmm.
We stretched that story out. I always remember one day I turned in, worked out a plot with an editor, turned it in. It was for a one-issue story. Then the editor called me up and said, listen, this is a little thin for 2 issues. And I said, when did it become 2 issues? He said, the sales department decided it should be 2 issues. I said, well, then I have to rewrite it to make it worth 2 issues. I said, don't rewrite it until I get back to you. Then they called me and said, no, that 1 issue story is now a 4 issue story. I said, wait a minute. I don't know if I can turn it into a 4 issue story. I might be able to pad it into a 2 issue story, but I don't know about 4. I said, don't rewrite it till I get back to you. And then then they called me back. No, it's got to be an 8 issue story. And I said, all right, the only thing we're keeping is the general theme and the title of the first issue. I said, I can get the first plot to you in 2 days. They said, no, we need it 1 day. And that was my life during the Clone Saga.
Wow. So you couldn't wait for it to end?
I couldn't wait for it to end. I could not wait for it to end.
Last one, and I'll let you go.
Okay.
Is there any stories that you've been keeping for yourself, saying, I'm not ready, I'm not ready, I'm not ready, but that you know that sooner or later, before you retire or die, that story is going to be told, that story is going to be written, being in novels, being in comics, being in whatever?
There are a couple of stories. I'd say I think I have just maybe 3 of them left at this stage of the game.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not like I'm holding them back. I just, haven't had time. None of them are for comics.
Mm-hmm.
I think it might be 3. The problem always is I'm finishing up one, another idea pops up. So,
there's 3, but it could be 3 more tomorrow. That's
it could be 3 more. It's just, I just always, I always feel like such a goofball. Somebody, says, hey, you have any film things hanging around that we can? And I go, no, they're all everything that I had. I don't have anything hanging around.
Mm-hmm.
Everything is, sold. Any ideas that you got? Yeah, but I got to finish. I'm contractually obligated to finish some other things before I can get to these things. So let me, I just, like I said, I'm luckier than I have any right to be.
Mm-hmm. Anyway, thank you so much for being here, Tom. That is being amazing. I hope you enjoyed it at least.
I enjoyed it. Thank you very much, David. And to all your listeners and stuff, thank you so much for being there. Thank you so much for all the support. I really do appreciate it. I'm still trying to get better. Someday I'll give you something really worthwhile. But thank you. Mm-hmm. I grew up. I wanted to have a career in comics. One of the luckiest guys in creation because I actually got to live my dream, and in many regards, I'm still living it. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much for everything as an editor and especially as a writer, for everything you've given us and you are still giving us. Let's not talk about the past because it's still happening.
Okay.
And to all of you, thank you so much for being here, and see you back this week twice on Wednesday. That one is in Espanol, in Spanish, with artists and writers Magius and Rogelio J. They do socials. You'll see. And on Friday, Viernes, somebody I think pretty well known by this guy named Tom. His name is Mike Martz, and he's the editor-in-chief at Aftershock. And I think they pretty know each other, and he's going to be here on Friday.
A really good guy.
So thank you all. See you all here. Again, as I said, same time, same channel, different time zones, I guess, at 5 p.m. in Spain. And remember, daylight savings. Oh, I got to call Mike Martz and talk him about daylight because it's 11 a.m. Shit, I just remembered. Thank you so much.